Welcome back from lunch. We've had some incredible presenters who have inspired and encouraged us, as well as given us tools and strategies to grow this important work of inclusion forward for all of our students. Our closing keynote address has been designed to be interactive. So as you are listening to our presenter, please add questions that you would like her to answer in the Q&A portion of the Zoom feature. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our closing keynote, Diana Pastora Carson. She's been an elementary educator for over 30 years, co-teaches a disability and society course at San Diego State University, and is a respected consultant on diversity as it relates to disability. She's the author of several articles and books, including Beyond Awareness, Bringing Disability into Diversity Work in K-12 Schools and Communities, and children's book, Ed Roberts, Champion of Disability Rights. Diana is known for her powerful keynote presentations and educational workshops related to disability awareness and inclusive teaching practices. Her disability awareness work in schools has earned her statewide recognition in the areas of advocacy and outreach. In addition to a TED Talk podcast, Beyond Awareness, Disability Awareness Matters, this former Teacher of the Year has been featured in several articles and other podcasts. She served 2 terms on the Board of Directors of Disability Rights California and currently serves as a board member of Disability Voices United. Although Diana experiences disability herself, she credits her passion for this work to her brother Joaquin, who endured years of segregated schooling and subsequent institutionalization. She takes the most pride in knowing that after many years of fighting for him, he now lives a life of self-determination, inclusion, and quality in the community as her next-door neighbor. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for being here with us and ending our day in the best way possible.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm so honored to be here. I'm going to move my toolbar over very quickly. Before I begin, I want you to know that my brother Joaquin gives his permission and his blessing for me to share our journey with you today. He's actually helped me to prepare some keynotes, and he has been present in the audience when I've given talks about our journey. And he always says, "Right on, baby," when he's in the audience. I'll be sharing some very personal moments and graphic stories and images related to institutionalization and abuse and neglect, as well as grief, solely for the purpose of enhancing our understanding of the importance of inclusion, access, and belonging, and the importance of having respectful and dignifying attitudes around disability and other differences within our communities. Please take care of yourself, as I know these topics can be difficult at times. I also want you to know that I share these very personal stories with you with complete trust, that no matter what we have chosen to share with you today, you will hold Joaquin with dignity in your mind and in your heart, for this is what we've come to experience and what we now expect. So let's begin the story. Once upon a time, in a land not so far away, there lived a little boy and a little girl who loved each other very much. Each day, the little girl walked to school and the little boy stayed home because he had a disability. Until one day, a new law was passed that said all children could go to school, even if they had a disability. This made the little girl very happy, and she knew it made her brother happy too. She would finally get to introduce her brother to her friends, and they could play together at recess. On the first day of his school, a short yellow bus came to pick up her brother, and she walked to school as usual. Once at school, she walked by her brother and the other students in his class as she smiled on the way to her classroom. She could hardly focus in class as it was almost time for recess, and she couldn't wait for the recess bell to ring. When it finally did, the little girl ran to her brother's room to take him out to play. But on the way there, she was stopped by a big metal fence. And on the other side of that fence stood her brother and a teacher. Out of breath, she excitedly asked, "Hi, I'm here to take Joaquin out to recess to play. Can he come out now?" And the teacher responded, "I'm sorry, but you cannot take him out to your playground." And then the little girl asked, "Well then, can me and my friends come play with him here?" And the teacher responded, "No, You cannot. He belongs on this playground and you belong on yours. That, my friends, was the first time in my life that I realized that my brother Joaquin was viewed in a different way than the rest of the students in my school. Even though the law said he could be in school, it wasn't required that he be included. He was perceived as too different to belong, too damaged to matter. It wasn't required that he be honored for who he was, and it was not required that he be loved. As a 7-year-old, I learned that you can't legislate love. So a few weeks later, in Joaquin's separate but equal setting, Joaquin was too lively, too active for the rules of the class, and he was placed in a timeout room because movement differences were not something that was allowed. They were perceived as him being non-compliant. And so we don't know how long Joaquin was in that timeout room, but we do know that he was in there long enough to have a bowel movement. And after he had the bowel movement, he had feces all over his body, all over the floor, and all over the walls of that timeout room, which was essentially a closet with a peephole in it. So my mother, who barely spoke any English, was called and was told that she needed to come to the school. She needed to clean up the timeout room, clean up her son, and she needed to take him home, not to return. My mother understood very clearly that her son was not wanted there anymore. And she went to the school with rags and soap and a bucket and Clorox and in tears, cleaned up and took her son home. So the school district was in a bind because they were now legally required to provide a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. But the least restrictive environment didn't succeed at schooling, not only Joaquin, but many other children. And so they quickly came up with a non-public school that was started for students who, like Joaquin, fell into that category of not quite fitting the mold of what was deemed normal or manageable. And at that school, they also had many timeout rooms. They had not only timeout rooms, but they had a lot of aversive conditioning methods. For instance, they had a spray bottle filled with water that they would use to spray Joaquin and others in the face if he were not following along, not paying attention, seemingly. If he were being aggressive, they had spray bottles filled with vinegar where he was sprayed in the mouth with vinegar. They also had a procedure called the head down procedure, where if Joaquin were not manageable, not controllable, not following directions according to their standards, he would be forced to have his hands behind his back, sitting on his bottom, and his head touching the floor. And if he couldn't do it or wouldn't do it voluntarily, there were plenty of people who could forcibly restrain him. And it happened a lot. So fast forward 10 years, Joaquin is still at that school. He's 6 feet tall and weighs 200 pounds, and they were no longer able to control this man. Of course, he wasn't getting reading and writing and math, social studies and science instruction, but it was all about control. The whole notion of education for him was about controlling him. And they could no longer control this man who was trying to communicate that he didn't like his life quality and he wanted things to change. And my parents were told that if they didn't put Joaquin on psychotropic medications, he would be kicked out of school. And there would be nowhere else for him to go except a state hospital 2 hours away. To make a long story short, my parents resisted for months until they could not resist any longer as the ultimatum became very real. Joaquin began taking psychotropic medications that he was highly allergic to. And from that day began a series of unfortunate events that quickly spiraled into a day when I came home from my senior year of high school to find my brother naked and sweating on the floor, struggling to break free, with my dad straddled over him. My dad, who was my hero, sweat and tears dripping down his face and onto Joaquin, who he was holding down in order to prevent further damages to our home and to protect our mother, who was ill and who was on the sofa sobbing, and to protect our siblings from Joaquin's out of control, drug-induced, aggressive state. And my dad looked over at me and he said, "Diana, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go into the garage and get a rope." And I did what he said. And my dad proceeded to tie Joaquin's hands and feet together so he could catch his breath, so he could take a break and make a phone call. He called the social worker at our local regional center, but since the social worker wasn't available, my dad got in touch with the parent ombudsman, who was also a sympathetic father of another autistic adult. And he was told, "Mr. Carson, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but I am required to call CPS, and you must untie your son. And first thing in the morning, you must take him to the state hospital 2 hours away." And the next morning, our family drove to Fairview Developmental Center, where Joaquin spent a total of 15 years of his life. When I think back on the story of the events that happened, I often wonder why. Why did this have to happen to my mom? My mom, Ana, who was the oldest of 12, who was an immigrant from Sevilla, Spain, who quit school to help feed her younger siblings at age 9. She came to the United States after marrying our father. She learned English and she dedicated her life to finding ways for her son and all of her kids to be okay. But specifically for Joaquin, for years she prayed for God's forgiveness and for God's help so she could be a better mother, because back in the day, autism was supposedly caused by the refrigerator mothers, the cold parenting. And she prayed for all of her sins to be forgiven that might have caused this affliction, quote unquote affliction, and prayed for God to heal her son. Why did that have to happen to her? And why did it have to happen to my dad, AKA Elvis Presley? Enlisted in the Navy the day that he turned 17, got his GED at age 30, and served his country for 20 years while being a dedicated father and husband. And he did all this at a time when having a child with a disability brought so much pain and stigma, yet he stood strong for his family. Why did this have to happen to these good parents? And I'm not asking why was their son disabled, but why was their son denied love and inclusion? Why was he forced into institutionalization? But more importantly, why did this have to happen to Joaquin? Why did he have to endure this? Why was this an acceptable option for someone whose only crime was being born different into a rigid, judgmental, ableist, and impatient society? This question has guided me in my work and in our family's quest to right the wrongs of the past and support healing and inclusion for Joaquin. Before we get to the answer of why, I want to first give you a glimpse of Joaquin and the effects of institutionalization on him. Know that in the video I'm going to show you, this was the first time I'd ever seen Joaquin physically cry actual tears. And you'll notice during the video that he himself was surprised by his own tears.
Oh man. No, man, I want to go home, dear.
You're gonna go home, honey. You're gonna go home.
Well, I was crying, dear.
Yeah.
No, I was crying, dear. I was crying. I was crying. It's getting tired, dear. I'm getting tired, dear. Dear, I'm getting tired.
I know. You want to leave, huh?
Oh, I'm getting tired, dear. I'm getting tired.
I know, honey.
Getting tired. Can I walk now? I know, I won't walk. Just walking and getting tired, yeah. I'm getting tired, yeah. Oh, man.
So what was Joaquin tired of? Here's Joaquin's front door. This is his home. This is a very sterile, very cold place. His front door was made of metal and it slammed every time somebody walked in and out. And no disrespect to the people who lived there at the institution. This was a place you could smell before you arrived at the front door. This is Joaquin's shoes he was wearing one day when I went to visit him. He was wearing a shoe, one shoe that belonged to Cynthia and another that belonged to Darwin. These are socks that Joaquin was wearing on various days at the institution when I went to visit him. Socks belonging to Mark and Gregory and Manuela and Mark and Matthew and Robert and Donald, but not Joaquin's socks. On the left, you'll see Joaquin's the waistband from his underpants, and it had somebody else's name crossed off on the bottom and his J. Carson written in Sharpie on the top part of the band. And then on the right, you'll see a picture of a shirt he was wearing that his name was written on top of somebody else's name. Joaquin's favorite thing in the world is his backpack. And so Joaquin, I arrived to take him out one day and they couldn't find his backpack. So they went inside and after about 10 minutes came back with someone else's backpack that they crossed off their name and wrote Joaquin's name on it. Not only, denying Joaquin of his own belongings, but somebody else who didn't have a say in what happened to their belongings. This is on the left, a bite mark on Joaquin's back, and nobody knew how it happened. And on the right, a bruise on his eye. Nobody knew how it happened. I apologize for that. I did turn off notifications, but it's not working. This is a cabinet inside the office. One day I went to visit Joaquin and he wasn't ready. So they put me into an office space, and on one of the cabinets, they had a door that said restraint books. And I thought to myself, this is so telling of what the focus is here, is that it's more about restraint. It's more about control. It's not about support. So that was his life of segregation and institutionalization. Every weekend, my parents and I, for 15 years, drove to the institution 2 to 3 hours away to visit Joaquin and to take him out to parks and beaches and to eat his favorite foods and to tell him that we still loved him and that we weren't giving up on him. Meanwhile, I became a teacher. I got 3 teaching credentials, one for students with complex disabilities, one for students with learning disabilities, and one for students learning English as a second language, as well as a master's degree in special education. I wanted to cover all the bases. Because of what I had experienced and witnessed on my journey with Joaquin, I was passionately committed to 2 things. One was inclusion. Separate but equal as a default setting was not something I could support. And so as an educator, I've always sought out the kiddos that were at risk of being placed in separate special education classrooms simply based on a diagnosis. Although my principals always respected my commitment to inclusion and supported students with disabilities being placed in my classroom, the problem with my one-woman show was that it lacked district support. Once the students with significant disabilities left my classroom, I had no say-so in their next placement. They had no say-so, it seemed, in their next placement. Let me give you an example of a student who flourished in an inclusive setting. Even though he's non-speaking, like Joaquin was, and initially had significant behavioral dysregulation, like Joaquin did. Here you see Alex with Mrs. Yagan, his one-on-one assistant, as they taught an art lesson together. Yes, Alex needed support, especially in the beginning of the year. But Alex made friends. He felt a sense of belonging. His anxiety subsided the safer he felt. He loved coming to school. And you know what? He was loved. His peers loved having him in their class. So much so that they actually revolted once when a parent wanted to take a class photo while Alex was at his speech therapy class. They insisted on waiting for Alex. Alex mattered. So we had a situation with Alex wanting to be he was very much into moving. Movement was a big deal for Alex. So we were having some issues with Alex not being able to keep his body to himself when sitting on the rainbow rug, when it was, lesson time or story time. And so I asked my students, including Alex, what would be a good way to support you, Alex? What is it that you need from us in order to be able to participate and for others to also be able to participate in the learning? And so the students responded, Alex really likes being squished. Can we try to squish on the rainbow rug? And so we tried it and Alex liked it. And so Alex benefited. Everyone benefited from our collaboration, our, thinking outside the box, being creative, including Alex in the conversation. Students became enlightened and compassionate peers. And of course, many of you know how much of a better teacher we become when we practice inclusion. So here's another situation we had in the class. We had the story, you know of the story of the little red hen, where the hen was making a cake and the dog and the cat and the duck didn't help with any of the preparations for making the cake. And it's essentially a story about reaping what we sow. She wanted help planting and cutting and milling the wheat in order to make the cake, but the dog and the cat and the duck didn't want to help. So then the ethical dilemma or the question at the end of the story is, should the hen share her cake with the others? And the students voted on whether or not they would share their cake with the dog, the cat, and the duck, since they hadn't helped in creating it. And when it was Alex's turn, we used a yes/no app on my phone to make sure that his voice was heard. Not only notice when I'm going to look at these pictures, I want you to notice how Alex was included but also how thrilled the others were to see Alex's thoughts. And if you're wondering what Alex said, he said no. He didn't think that she should share the cake with the duck and the cat and the dog. So Alex taught us to be more creative, more open. He taught students to be more insightful and intentional and compassionate as friends. And again, I was modeling my belief that everyone's voice matters, and I fostered belonging for Alex and all the other students in the class. So my students at the end of the year, we went to a park to celebrate the end of kindergarten. And this was the video I'm going to show you is of our walk back to school from the park. And you'll notice in the Alex, you'll see him as he's walking, and you'll also notice that there's a woman who's watching him, and that's his mom, who's feeling very happy that her son is included, that her son is part of a community, that her son belongs. And I think too, understanding that his future is brighter, knowing that when his classmates grow up to become the adults in our community, the law enforcement officers, the educators, the medical professionals, the business owners, and the parents, they're going to remember the importance of inclusion and belonging. They're going to remember Alex. She knew that Alex was going to be okay. And for a parent, isn't that priceless? So let's go ahead and play the video. I hope you're smiling as much as I am. I love that video. Okay, let's go. Sorry. Okay, so I was committed to inclusion. The other thing I was committed to as an educator was disability awareness. I learned so many different strategies and lessons from well-intentioned mentors who'd come before me. We did things like smearing glasses with Vaseline to see what it might be like to be blind. We used a wheelchair for a couple minutes to learn how it might feel to be a wheelchair user. Essentially, we thought that simulations would teach empathy and would promote inclusion. But I soon found out that this was not actually the case. Those outdated simulation activities that I thought would make the world a better place may have been engaging and they may have warmed some hearts, but they did nothing to transform our ableist mindsets. In fact, research shows that simulations can even do more harm than good. And I was doing it all wrong. I just didn't know it until fast forward a few more years and my three worlds collided. My world as a sibling advocate, my world as an elementary educator were powerfully introduced to another world, the world of teaching a college course. I was asked to teach a disability studies class at a local community college. I was willing and excited to teach it, but a little apprehensive because I wasn't sure I was exactly qualified. Well, yes, I had a master's degree in special education and I knew a lot about disabilities. I didn't know a lot about disability or the experience of being disabled, because at the time I didn't have a disability. So I thought it would be best to start doing some research. I began reading books by disabled authors about their life experiences. I began reading about disability history, which was never something I was taught in school, not even in college. I started following disabled activists and authors on social media, learning about disability studies and disability rights and the disability justice movement. And what I learned turned my world upside down. I had an entirely new understanding of what disability is and how society has historically perpetuated fear and stigma and discrimination around disability and continues to do so, even in the wake of landmark legislation in the US. Suddenly, I had clarity about why Joaquin had been segregated and institutionalized, why I always had to advocate for and facilitate inclusion on my own in my school district, why students were oftentimes automatically returned to separate settings once they left my classroom. I learned about ableism and how it's ingrained systemically in our society, as well as in our schools. I knew that we had to do better. Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better." I had done the best I could with the best of intentions. And the new knowledge I acquired sparked a complete transformation of all my disability awareness efforts. From then on, there were to be no more simulation activities, no more disabled people talking to, no more non-disabled people talking to students about disability. No more inspirational speakers telling of how they overcame their disability. Because now I knew they were overcoming something else, namely, it was ableism. We needed to have hard conversations led by people with disabilities, not medical professionals or special educators, but disabled activists coming to share their personal stories while educating us about topics that can actually make a difference, such as ableism, access and inclusion, assistive technology, disability history, disability rights and disability justice, and respectful language. We needed to take students and educators beyond simple awareness that disability exists if we wanted to make a difference for future generations. I realized that the key takeaways of disability awareness should be that disability is a normal and natural part of the human experience. Disability is a valuable part of diversity. There's nothing wrong with a person's body or mind. People don't want to be objects of pity or inspiration. People want access. People want inclusion. And what's wrong is society's response to disability. In other words, when we begin to understand our role in disabling others, we can begin to create inclusive possibilities and empowerment for all of us. So you might be wondering whether or not this new understanding translated into making a difference for Joaquin. Well, let me share the ending to our story. Our family went to court for 3 years, advocating for Joaquin to leave the institution and come back home. We worked tirelessly, fighting against a system that told us it couldn't be done, that he was a danger to himself and others, that we weren't capable of providing what he needed. And we were fighting the system that would not support us in providing what he needed. We built Joaquin a home at the end of a country road in a rural setting, his preferred environment on my property in San Diego County. This home is designed to meet his unique needs. Our goal was to give him his own space and dignity, a place where he felt like he belonged and where he could heal and where we could be a family again. And after 3 years, we finally won our case. And Joaquin has been my next door neighbor now for 11 years and counting. Now, when we were in the process of fighting for Joaquin's freedom, my mom said to Joaquin, "Joaquinito, when you come home, what do you want mommy to make you for dinner?" And Joaquin said, "Steak." And we don't know why he said steak, because we were more of a chicken and rice kind of family. I don't remember us, at least the kids, ever eating steak. But Joaquin speaks in metaphors. And we soon found out, after those 3 years of Joaquin saying, "I like steak, I want steak, steak is coming, steak is coming, steak is coming," we realized that steak was Joaquin's metaphor for life quality, for inclusion. So what is steak? Steak is enjoying quality relationships. Steak is sitting on your front porch with your sister and making brownies with your sister. Steak is having time with mom and dad and having a mustache growing contest with dad and getting to sit by the pool with mom and just chill. Steak is when your uncle Joaquin and your cousin Joaquin are visiting from Spain and they sandwich your brother Joaquin for a family photo in the living room. True story. And our Aunt Joaquina didn't come on this trip. Steak is getting tender, loving care from people who care and who you trust. This is me after work one day. Joaquin had a headache and I was able to comfort him and rub some oils on his head and just help him to feel better, give him a little massage. Steak is receiving healthcare with comforts. Joaquin now has people with him who get to go when he has a procedure in the hospital or has some medical issues. He didn't get that when he was in an institution. Steak is having your key to your own home in your hand the entire time you're at the hospital for a procedure. That's steak. Steak is being able to comfort your mom when she needs you the most. You couldn't do that when you were in an institution. And steak is getting to grieve the loss of your mother, getting to be with her body the day that she died, getting to experience grief, the good and the bad, but doing it surrounded by loving family members. Had Joaquin been at the institution, he would not have been able to grieve with dignity. Steak is celebrating your 50th birthday among friends and family. Steak is having a harem of neighborhood women who love to see you come and say, hey, there's my cowboy. Steak is having a neighbor come and check in regularly, unannounced, and saying to the sister, hey, I don't like that new staff person you got. And that staff person ultimately being let go because of the way they were treating my brother. And because a neighbor who cared came in, having natural supports, that's steak. Having friendships in the community, that's steak. Steak is going to a neighborhood barbecue and getting to sit and hang out for only as long as you wanted to, and then getting to leave because you live right around the corner. It's not like you drove 2 or 3 hours to get here to be in that neighborhood community event. Steak is getting to stand with your home health nurse as she's drinking a beer and getting to chat with her. That's steak. Steak is getting a ride from your neighbor as he passes by on his farm vehicle and says, hey, Joaquin, you want a ride? And you say, heck yes. Steak is going for a walk with the neighbor's kids because the neighbors trust you. This man who was called a danger to himself and others, the neighbors know that he is making choices about when he is able to be in control of his body and not, and that he would not put others in danger. They trusted him. They trust him with their children. That's steak. Steak is getting to ride on your neighbor's Harley every Sunday. Look at that joy. That's so steak. Steak is being self-determined, having a life that you love and making choices about where you want to go and who you want to go with. Steak is going shopping and overfilling your shopping cart because your sister's not with you and didn't get to see. That's steak. Steak is having a cup of coffee at a local cafe. Couldn't do that in the institution. Steak is getting to move, having freedom in movement, joy in movement. Look at that joy. Steak is riding your bike whenever you want to. And steak is choosing the perfect spot to park the bike, even if it's in front of your television in your own home. Steak is learning and teaching at San Diego State University on days when you know that you're in control of your body and you get to sit in the front row and have a fan club basically there for you. Stake is finally having multimodal communication opportunities where your communication is honored, respected, and sought out. That is stake. That's not something that Joaquin had all those years in school and all those years in an institution. And now we want to hear what he has to say. And he is getting better and better at it every day. Stake is having Team Joaquin. Stake is having a committed, well-trained, personalized team of people that surrounds you to support you, not to control you. So what changed about Joaquin? Nothing. We knew everything about Joaquin's diagnosis. His label did not change. In fact, he still has good days and bad days. He was not cured of autism, but something changed that gave him an opportunity to grow and begin to heal. He did not change, but his community did. And from that, he was able to access life quality. We changed everything about our attitudes, about Joaquin's access to all these things, and everything about our commitment to inclusion. We changed not only his environments, we changed our minds. We changed our minds about who Joaquin was, what defined him, what he wanted, what he needed, and how he could have it. We saw Joaquin as perfect as he was, not broken. We saw our role as supporters, not controllers. We saw our relationship to Joaquin as equals, noting that his role in our lives was just as important as our role in his. We began to value him, and our actions demonstrated how we esteemed him. Our goal was to make his potential a reality. He was at the time 42 years old, and he finally had people committed to making his potential a reality. Supporting Inclusive Practice's mission is to empower each student to be purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-directed within an environment of belonging, community, and connection. I love that. It is so hard, maybe even impossible, to be purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-oriented without an environment of belonging, community, and connection. For Joaquin, none of those things were possible in his life. How can a person be purposeful and motivated when they are constantly being punished for being different from the norm, or when their surroundings serve as a reminder that they just don't belong? How can a person be resourceful and knowledgeable when their communication is unseen or disregarded, and when they are denied opportunities to learn new concepts alongside their peers? How can a person be strategic and goal-oriented when they can't even get their basic human needs expressed or met by the people who are getting paid to support them? Joaquin's potential could not be realized in his previous environments. And now, after 40 plus years of segregation, isolation, discrimination, and abuse, his environment has changed to one of belonging, community, and connection. Now, he's finally on a path of purposeful healing, catching up on his knowledge base, and setting goals for himself. And his life, based on what he has communicated, is meaningful to him. And so here you all are, educators, paraprofessionals, parents, students, people with a vision for inclusive, connected communities where every student belongs. Joaquin's past represents all the children whose potential is being grossly limited and has yet to be realized due to outdated belief systems, structures, and supports, even after years of legislation and disability awareness programming. I know many of us here care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we care about belonging. But so often in DEI conversations, disability is left out, or it's included in a tokenistic manner. Access and belonging are often left out as well, yet they are foundational to true diversity appreciation. Disability is the largest minority group in the world when you consider mobility and physical disabilities, sensory disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, mental health disabilities, and chronic illnesses. And yet, we fail to include disability as a part of diversity when discussing diversity and inclusion. Meanwhile, neurodiverse and other disabled children's needs are, as we all know, routinely overlooked, and adults with disabilities continue to experience discrimination and exclusion, not only in education, but also in housing, healthcare, employment, and every area that we consider to be factors of life quality, factors of stake. Today at SIP's Inclusion from the Ground Up conference, we are moving beyond awareness that disabilities exist. What made a difference for Joaquin and for Alex wasn't awareness of their disabilities. We already knew about their disabilities. What made a difference was evaluating ourselves and acknowledging our shortcomings and moving ahead with an unshakable commitment to full access, inclusion, and belonging within their communities. What made a difference within Joaquin's home community and Alex's learning community was neighbors and peers and support people getting to know them as individuals in a deep and respectful way, and understanding that they actually contribute to our lives as much as we contribute to them. I'm going to say that one more time. They actually contribute to our lives as much as we contribute to them. Look, I'm just one person. I'm just one tiny speck on the globe who has one lived experience as a sibling and as an educator, and who's doing my best based on a newfound awareness of societal ignorance and apathy, including my own. And yes, I have made a positive difference for Joaquin and for Alex and for countless others, no doubt. But what I want you to know today is that my power as a singular entity pales in comparison to our collective power. I am here, humbled by all of you. You most likely have 20 things or more on your to-do list today. You have lessons to prepare, evaluations and IEPs to tend to, appointments to get to, carpools waiting, sports practices, shopping, dogs to walk, and dinners to make. You're extremely busy. Many of you are stressed out just thinking of your kiddos, trying to figure out how to make inclusion a successful reality in our world. But you have not given up, and in spite of all the things you have going on, you are here, you are committed, and I'd say you're extraordinary. Please just take a moment to acknowledge yourself with that appreciation. And now, just imagine, with a little creative collaboration and a lot of commitment, what is possible for that child you're thinking of, or the many children you're thinking of. For all the students we together are thinking about, and their families. What's possible through your committed allyship? I challenge each of you here today to continue to grow and learn with creativity, courage, and commitment. I challenge you to learn and follow best practices, seek out resources that align with student dignity and belonging. And finally, I challenge you to commit to disability inclusion, true access, and actual belonging throughout the lifespan. Because only when we believe that all means all, we will make every child's potential a reality. I have one small gift for you, one last gift from Joaquin and me, and I encourage you to sing along. When I was a kid, one of my teachers brought his guitar to school and taught my class a country song, and I memorized it. And every night thereafter, I sang Joaquin to sleep with it. And to this day, it holds a special meaning for us. Take me home to the place where I belong.
Miss Gina.
West Virginia, Mountain Mama.
Take me home.
Take me home,
California.
country road.
Take me home, Dad.
Take me home,
To the
country road. To the place
Take me home, Dad.
where I belong.
Nice to meet you.
West Virginia, Mountain Mama.
Take me home.
Take me home,
Country road.
country road.
Country home. Take me home, Dad. Home.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you so much, and steak be with you.
Diana, that was absolutely incredible. I know that you were presenting and sharing and probably couldn't follow the chat as quickly as the rest of us were trying, but there were tears and applause and praise and inspiration. And we're all choked up. So this has been the most incredible way to end our keynote. We have a little bit more time. We have some Q&A with you, but I just want to say a couple things. Again, thank you for sharing your personal family story with us all. And taking us beyond awareness. It is so much more than just being aware and really lifting up the voice of the disability community, which is what we've been trying to do in this conference as well, to learn to, as you mentioned, and Maya Angelou mentions, to do better. And it is about pushing against the system and not just sticking with the status quo and thinking that we don't have an impact on this work, because we do. It's not easy, but it's worth it. So we hope everybody goes out and eats steak. We're going to thank you so much, Diana. And we apologize if we didn't get to everybody's questions. We could just spend the whole rest of the afternoon and all day tomorrow with you, Diana. So thank you so much to you and your family. And I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Great. Such a powerful end of the day. Our team would like to thank all of you for attending day one of our SIP Inclusion Conference. From Heather Calamise's kickoff to the Redwood Seed Scholars testimonials, to DJ B. Diamond's jazzy interludes, to the incredibly informative breakout sessions. Ending the day with Diana and Joaquin's impassioned story of belonging, community, inclusion, and steak. Disability, disability, disability. It isn't a bad word rooted in deficit. It's a source of pride. We hope you leave today with a renewed sense of passion for this important work. As a result, leverage that passion into action. Please join us tomorrow for another day of learning, connection, and community within an inclusive environment of belonging and collaboration. And remember to always innovate, include, and impact. To close, we have a special message to share from a member of our SIP family. Dr. Ed Manansala, Superintendent of the El Dorado County Office of Education. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Dorado County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for participating in this first day of the second annual SIP Inclusion Conference. It was inspirational to hear from the UC Davis Redwood Seed Scholars and Mentors and how they promote integrated employment for all. Diana Pastora Carson also delivered a powerful message about her brother Joaquin and their journey of overcoming. Be sure to come back tomorrow to hear from international speaker Dr. Andratisha Fitzgerald and various sessions. We hope you took advantage of your time immersed in networking, collecting best practices, learning from experts, and renewing your spirit to create change and action for our schools and students. This year's conference theme is Inclusion from the Ground Up, cultivating a strong foundation from birth to adulthood, because we believe that school-based inclusion leads to lifelong community-based inclusion. Our mission is to elevate the voices and experiences of the disability community to advance equitable outcomes for all. Let us take what we've gathered from our time together and plant seeds of change that inspire inclusivity for all.
Thank you, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow for more learning, community, and belonging.